Hello, Kim Dodsworth, Queensland storyteller. In today's story, a mother and her pregnant daughter share some frank talk, and this leads to a new resolve on the part of the older woman who examines her conscience and seeks inspiration from the life of her own mother, now dead for a number of years. A story both sad and happy that will tug at heartstrings. It's by our regular contributor in Adelaide, Maureen Mitson. The story is called Remote Control. It was a typical mother and daughter discussion. Ours were usually lively and enjoyable, but this time we'd somehow wandered onto the topic of heritage, which segued into lost values, latent and unfostered talents, and I was the one in the hot seat. Karen, a teacher, was complaining about the behaviour of some of the pupils in her class at school. She warmed to her conviction that their antics stemmed from boredom and a rigid curriculum. I innocently inquired, "Can't you introduce some activities, some handcrafts, arty things, conduits for creativity?" I was proud of that phrase, but I had not allowed for her mood nor her response. "It's too late now. I go on to maternity leave in a couple of weeks. It's typical of you, Mum, a suggestion like that. You can do it all, but do you ever? You never showed me how, and I never see you knitting or crocheting, though now you've lots of time." She contemplated her coffee mug. Beautiful things mattered to Gran, really mattered, didn't they? All those baby photos of me wearing those lovely embroidered and crocheted outfits she made for me. Yet you gave those clothes away. Didn't you realize one day I'd love to pass them down to my own children? She patted her very pregnant girth. Such embroidery is heritage stuff, Mum, to pass down the generations. Though we had parted as friends, I spent much of the drive home thinking of what she'd said. How could I have known she'd feel this way? I'm no crystal ball. Was I really as selfish as Karen had made me feel, as careless of heritage and talent? Now I'm retired, am I really as self-seeking in my idleness as Karen has made me feel? I admit I regard my well-earned free time as my own to fill as I wish. Time passes pleasantly enough for Fred and me. We have interests we share. I have my art, some writing interests which I indulge, but hobbies, crafts, none she'd recognise. That's where the unfostered talent bit was thrown at me. She thought me lazy. Later, curled up in my chair with a postprandial coffee, I indulged in some suey psychoanalysis. Okay, maybe I could do more with my time, and for others. But what? Knit squares for blankets? Not my scene. My mother had been one of the involved types, on committees, a brown owl, supporting scouts, yet found time to indulge her arty crafty talents. She had sold her works, designed beautiful embroidery. I thought it unfair that I should be judged by her energies and achievements. Yet reluctantly, little snippets of memory intruded, little cameos. My talented mum patiently encouraging me, showing me how to make patterns for sewing my own clothes, and giving little tips on getting a good effect. As a fashion-conscious young teenager, that had interested me. I failed at the other more delicate skills, the knitting and crochet. I drained my coffee and collected our mugs. Fred was deep into his latest crime novel and looked over his specs at me as I asked, "When I do pop my clogs, what memories of me will linger? What treasures of my creation will be cherished by anyone?" He knew of my chat with Karen, so he just grinned, flicked his fingers in dismissal, and resumed his chapter. I rinsed the mugs. Darn Karen and her notions of heritage. I'd been quite happy with myself, and now she had put a flaming big dent in my persona, my self-image. On an impulse, I raided the plastic bags at the top of the linen cupboard. Here I'd stored Mum's crafty things, years ago after she died. Knitting, crochet, sewing patterns, they were all still there, protected by faded lavender flowers from the garden. I sneezed heartily as clouds of powdered perfume whirled into the air. One bundle, wrapped in yellowing tissue paper, attracted my curiosity. Its seeming fragility prompted delicate handling, and I was carefully patient to see what I'd hidden away. It was a partly completed baby shawl. I fingered it gently as I hunkered back on my heels. It was so delicate. Memories washed over me. Mum had been working on that until her fingers became too weak to hold it. It had been lying on the chair by her bed as they came to take her away, and I had rolled it up as I cried my goodbyes. I wondered whose baby she intended it for. All her grandchildren were now grown up. I held it up to the light. No moth, no marks, still beautiful. The last row of her knitting was incomplete, its stitches divided between the two needles still attached. I stroked it, gently. There were extra balls of the same wool. Could I remember how to knit as she did? Perhaps complete it as a joint project for Karen's baby, a gift from Great-Granny and Granny. If so, if I could, I might feel vindicated from all those past sins of omission Karen had hurled at me. Fred had gone to bed. I went back to my chair, turned on the light, and read the pattern through. It seemed straightforward. I hesitated, needles poised, strangely reluctant to continue the row. Then I gently thumbed the points of the needles together. My mum had been the last one to work with these. I mustn't break the connection, make a mistake. I imagined her watching me and waiting to see how long before I dropped a stitch. I sat, undecided. It seemed I heard her voice, as familiar, persuasive as before. "It's all right, Maureen. The first one is always the hardest. Just go into that next stitch. It's a slip one. Good. Now knit one, knit two together. Now yarn forward. That's right. Knit two together through the back loop. Very good. Knit three, knit two together. See it coming together. You only needed a nudge at the right time. It's all there, in your head. You can remember. Now, knit two together, pass the slip stitch over. See how the sequence is working out. Now repeat it to the end of the row. Next row's only purl. That's lovely. Oh, that's lovely. I became absorbed. Nothing interrupted my concentration. The clock was ticking to the rhythm of the needles, and the silent voice breathed the sequence of stitches as an unfailing mantra at the back of my mind. My hands, my fingers, were as loose and as deft as ever they were. I felt elated as the stitches grew behind my needle and the rows turned, albeit slowly, one upon another. My finger tension matched the rows that had gone before. The pattern was perfect. The same silent voice reminded me that a cup of tea might be a good idea if I intended to stay awake. I smiled and went to switch on the kettle, then collected myself. Cup of tea? I've been a coffee drinker for years. I even found myself carefully measuring a spoonful of loose tea leaves into a little pot. It was uncanny. I was being influenced from beyond my understanding, and I didn't care. It felt so good. I smiled, poured the tea into a cup balanced on its saucer, and resumed my chair. "Okay, Mum, let's continue." My fingers assumed a fleetness and sureness of touch such as I had watched many times. Row after row of flawless pattern was completed to the rhythm of that silent voice and as the unseen hand supported my elbow. Daylight marginalized the vertical drapes as they moved in an early breeze from the window. The first of the morning birds started their chattering in the rosemary bush. My neck was aching. I finished the row, laid the work carefully on my chair, and moved to tilt the drapes open to the new day. I heard my husband padding down the hall to the kitchen. I turned as a shaft of sunlight lifted the gossamer patterning of the shawl into stenciled relief. A gift for Karen's baby from Gran and Great-Gran. Just the crocheted border needed to be worked. I can accomplish that. Now. I felt weary, but energized. I had worked the wool and the needles, been the means of activating the skill, that artistry and control. But they'd come from someone else, someone in a place remote yet within touch, a touch which had coaxed from me an inherited but long dormant skill. The delicate result lay on my chair. Fred handed me a mug of piping hot coffee. His congratulations were to the point. "I knew you had it in you." Simply, pertinently put, the shawl is my mother's legacy, and my own inheritance is one I can and should pass on to my children and grandchildren. I'll develop the talent and share the skill with my daughter. It will be my own conduit of creativity. And that story was Remote Control by regular contributor Maureen Mitson of Adelaide. I hope you'll tune in again this time next week when I'll have another short story of quality for you. I'm Kim Dodsworth, Queensland Storyteller.